мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
On February 24, 2022, Vladimir Putin launched a war of aggression against the neighboring state of Ukraine. It was a violation of international agreements that dated back to 1945, and it came as a shock to the whole world, with ripple effects still being felt today. On that day, countless explosions rocked the Ukraine while Russian forces moved in swiftly from multiple directions, aiming to take control as fast as possible. Now, a year has passed since Russia's invasion and the conflict persists. Casualties, both military and civilian, have mounted into the hundreds of thousands, and millions of Ukrainians have been displaced. But how did we get to this point? We'll get into that later, but before we continue, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content. Both countries share a deep-rooted history that stretches over a millennium, tracing back to the time when Kiev, now Ukraine's capital, held a central role in the formation of the first Slavic state, Kievan Rus, the common origin of Ukraine and Russia. In the year 988 AD, Volodymyr the Great, the pagan prince of Novgorod and the Grand Prince of Kiev, embraced Orthodox Christianity and received baptism in the Crimean city of Chersonesus. It is this shared history that made Russian leader Vladimir Putin recently assert that Russians and Ukrainians are one people. However, over the past 10 centuries, Ukraine has repeatedly faced divisions by competing powers. The 13th century, Mongol warriors from the east conquered Kievan Rus. The 16th century saw them endure Polish and Lithuanian armies invading from the west. By the 17th century, a conflict between the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Tsardom of Russia resulted in the eastern part of Ukraine, called the Left Bank, falling under Russian imperial control, while the western territories, known as the Right Bank, came under Polish rule. Over 100 years later, in 1793, the Russian Empire basically grabbed hold of western Ukraine. After that, they started a thing called Russification, where they basically stopped the locals from using or learning Ukrainian. The Russians also forced Ukrainians to follow the Russian Orthodox faith. As a ripple effect of this, Ukraine went through some really tough times, lasting up to the 1900s. There was the Communist Revolution of 1917, which became worse when the country had a civil war erupt before getting absorbed into the Soviet Union in 1922. That was the beginning of a truly dark period in Ukrainian history. In the early 1930s, Stalin performed some actions that might be termed as brutal. He forced peasants to join collective farms, and it led to a horrible famine where millions of Ukrainians suffered and died. After that, Stalin decided he needed to repopulate the east. What must have seemed like the best decision to him was to bring in a bunch of Russians and other Soviet citizens who couldn't speak Ukrainian and didn't have any ties to the region. These bits of history left some deep scars. One important element in the history of this conflict is that eastern Ukraine was under Russian control way earlier than the west. So people in the east feel closer to Russia and tend to support leaders who lean that way. Western Ukraine, on the other hand, spent centuries under the control of various European powers like Poland and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This history has shaped the preferences of Western Ukrainians, making them more inclined to support politicians and Western leanings. In contrast, the eastern region has a higher proportion of Russian speakers and Orthodox followers, while parts of the west have a stronger presence of Ukrainian speakers and Catholics. In 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine became independent. But bringing the country together was challenging. Ukrainian nationalism isn't as strong in the east as it is in the west. The transition to democracy and capitalism was a bumpy ride, and many Ukrainians, especially in the east, missed the stability of earlier times. The biggest division emerged between those who see Russia and the Soviet rule favorably and those who view them as tragedies. This division became evident during the 2004 Orange Revolution, when thousands of Ukrainians marched to support closer ties with Europe. Many Russians view the Ukrainian capital Kiev as the birthplace of their nation and cite the numerous cultural ties between the two countries. Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union before it declared independence in a referendum just before the USSR fell apart in 1991. It's been independent ever since. However, Putin still calls Ukraine Russian and denies its status as a separate nation. Back in 2008, he even told then US President George W. Bush that Ukraine wasn't a real country. Many Russians share this view, and it's not just coming from the Kremlin. Russia considers Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, as a significant city with deep historical ties to Russia. Putin doesn't want it outside his control, it's a symbol of Russian heritage. Russia needs to claim Ukraine to bolster its argument of being a great power with a long history. Without it, they can't say they have thousands of years of history, since Kiev was already around 1200 years ago, while Moscow was just a forest. 15 countries that are independent today were once part of the Soviet Union, but Ukraine seems to matter more to Russia than nearby Belarus or other former USSR countries in Central Asia. Putin has always maintained that Ukrainians and Russians are essentially the same people, part of the Slavic Brotherhood along with Belarus. Belarus is already heavily influenced by Russia, so a military invasion there wouldn't achieve much. In contrast, Ukraine has been leaning towards the West in recent years, making it more of a prize for Russia. Plus, Ukraine is much bigger than Belarus, and Russia doesn't seem as interested in claiming Belarus's history. Ukraine has been important in the Russian political mindset for a long time. It's not a recent development. Additionally, Ukraine's territory has historically contributed to Russia's economic strength by supplying coal, steel, and iron to the Russian Empire in the 19th century. With the Ukraine's Donbas region, Russia became such a major player by the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The invasion of Ukraine reflects Putin's long-held grievances. To Putin, Russia has every right to have a say in Ukraine. Russians and Ukrainians are essentially one people who were artificially split when the Soviet Union fell apart, and he blames the West for trying to pull Ukraine away from Russia's natural friendship. When the invasion began, Putin pointed fingers at NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe as the reason he had to act, echoing criticism he's been making for years. There is also the notion of NATO posing a threat to Russia by moving closer to its borders. This is a key element of Russian propaganda. NATO doesn't simply expand on its own. Countries usually apply to join due to perceived external threats, often coming from Russia in Eastern Europe. Lithuania's Prime Minister, for example, said in February that her country joined NATO because of Putin. However, she also accused Putin of shifting blame and playing a blame game. Putin has been using the NATO angle to convince an international audience that might already have doubts about the Western military alliance. And if Russia can connect with even a minority who feel this way, it gives Russia a political foothold to try and hinder Western involvement. Even if NATO was expanding, it doesn't excuse Russia's actions in Ukraine. Ukraine's ties with NATO grew stronger after 2014, when pro-Russian forces invaded eastern Ukraine, sparking a conflict that lasted until the 2022 invasion. It's hard to see a logical explanation for how NATO's supposed expansion could lead to this war. Before Finland joined NATO, no new countries had joined the alliance since 2004, and even then, they were pretty small countries like Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. To make it more obvious, NATO didn't deploy more troops in the region, so the addition of those countries didn't create a massive military presence on Russia's doorstep. In reality, the US was reducing the size of its armed forces in Europe until pro-Russian forces occupied parts of Ukraine in 2014. It's quite possible that Putin also saw some opportunities in the global political landscape of 2022. He observed that Zelensky had a low approval rating before the invasion, and there was some infighting among Ukraine's elite, which made Putin believe they might not unite against him. The messy US exit from Afghanistan, the new bosses in Germany and the UK, and the heat on France's president all made Putin think that there wasn't any competent Western leadership that could stand up to the Russian aggression. Because of all that, Putin figured he could just stroll into Ukraine and snatch up Kiev in no time. But things haven't gone the way he thought. Almost all of Putin's guesses turned out to be off the mark. Do you think he might end up losing the war that he started? With that, we've come to the end of this video, but be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. See you later.